let me move on to something because if it's power all the way down, how do we do politics? How do we even, are we engaged in persuasion or are we engaged in coercion? Is the persuasion itself simply a veiled form of coercion?
Absolutely.
And this is the other.
I mean, that's the view.
That is the view, and it's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy to me that we can remove dialogue, conversation, exchange of ideas from the possibility of a human society that was just always power against power. It makes our politics. It reduces. It basically strips democracy of any of its deliberative content.
Absolutely, and that is, in fact, a very Schmittian view.
Yes.
So people who don't know where these ideas came from, I mean, they're old, you can say, in a sense, they go back to Thrasymachus, okay? But in their 20th century form, they came from Carl Schmitt, the Nazis' crown jurist, who, to the end of his life, and he died in, I believe it was 1987, never regretted having supported the Nazis, spent all of his vacations in Franco Spain, and was a fascist to, the end of his life, who believed that this is just the way the world is. Their deliberative democracy is a myth. It's inefficient. So it's both inefficient in times of trouble, but secondly, it's a lot of blabber about nothing. The real forces that turn us are of power between friends and enemies, and get used to it. Now, the reason he became I think he appeals to certain people on the left, besides the fact that it seems a little cool to be, reading an old Nazi, and this is not a secret that he never regretted or went back on his Nazi convictions. The main reason that I think a lot of progressive thinkers have turned to him is because he denounces both British and American colonialism. Okay, it's, they're talking about freedom, and they're, actually the British Empire was a monumental act of piracy, and that's all it is. And then he goes into the Monroe Doctrine. I would agree with him on both of those points, but what doesn't get pointed out is he's writing these kinds of criticisms in 1942, when Germany is at war with both Britain and America. And he's saying, everybody does it, so we might as well go colonize, Europe all the way to Vladivostok, okay? Which is what, of course, they were trying to do in 1942. So this is not somebody who was anti-colonialist. This was somebody who was saying everybody does it, and we might as well do it too. Yeah,
except the one thing you can't imagine Nazi Germany doing, if it had, say, permanently occupied Poland forever, is at some point in the 1970s deciding to construct a constitution and give it independence and withdraw. That is not something that would be in the wheelhouse of the Carl Schmitt.
No.
So, I mean, what it's saying is the British Empire, we'll talk about this with Nigel Bigger. We have this big conversation about his very controversial book, Defending Aspects of Colonialism. But the essential point is that it is and it was an exercise of raw power, but it turned out to be a little bit more complicated than that because it was infused with various liberal ideas that worked against it long term and unraveled it in the end. The same way that this notion that the Enlightenment really blessed slavery, when the Enlightenment was the first thing that actually critiqued slavery from a universalist point of view.
Exactly.
And made it possible for it to be abolished. Now, if you describe America, essentially, which is what the New York Times Magazine essentially did, as inherently violent, merely about power, merely about exploitation, and is true to this very day, and that we can make no distinction. There's been no progress, as it were, between 1619 and 2019. And I read books like Michelle Alexander or Isabel Wilkerson, God help us, and this inability to see that, yes, of course, we share lots of horror. There's a lot of things to criticize here, but it's surely better than it was, and that we can point to how it became better, and this notion that it's doomed forever because it's essential, and this is something most people don't understand about wokeness. it is a kind of Marxism without the happy ending. It is not
How's
the struggle. Well, here's what I'm trying to say: is that the power against power does not suddenly magically transform itself into a communist revolution when that happens, in which everybody can be free and happy. No, it's forever. That America is forever damned. It's forever racist. That there is no way out of these structures. That if you read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book to his own son, telling him, your country is dead set against you, always will be, and you just have to deal with that. It's paralyzing if you actually want to make things better.